which I know fairly well, has done well since 1870, in part by insisting there is a linguistic unity, although in fact, for example, in Sardinia, by any scientific definition, the Sards speak a different language at home, although they speak good Italian that they learn in schools. And in other words, there is a considerable range in Italy of dialectical, if not linguistic differences. And of course, there are still problems in Italy between the North and the South. But the Italian formula has been, in a sense, to insist that we are monocultural, we are all Catholic, and we are all Italians, which is a paving over a little bit some of the truth about Italy. So I think there's no single formula, but I would think that in many cases, homogeneity certainly predisposes can predispose to success.
Samuel B. Huntington was trying to preach the same thing in his book, Who Are We? By saying, look, there's a narrative in the United States, and we may be coming from a bunch of different countries, but the understood bargain was when you came to the United States, you adopted the British model, and you adopted the English model. Justice Scalia has attempted to apply the same principle in Supreme Court decisions, saying, no, you can talk about pre-American independence elements and cite them as precedent if they are British, if they are English law, principle which I find wrong. But that's an attempt to put a straitjacket on. Who Are We? It's an attempt to put a straitjacket on and to ignore reality, which is multi-ethnicity. But God only knows what analysis would be of the United States and whether or not the United States is a success, and to what extent multi-ethnicity contributes to the success. But certainly I would think that in addition to the resource-based way, its ethnic homogeneity was a factor, has been a factor in its success.
As you speak, I'm thinking off the top of my head that in the case of the United States, there has been, until now at least, another factor in our at least relative success in the world, and that has been a sense of common interest. And perhaps in the old days, the sense of common interest was, in a sense, enforceable, or the sense was that we are all Anglo-Saxons together, and those Irish and those Germans who are beginning to come, not to speak of the blacks who live in the South, but that's a different sort of people. But the sense of common purpose, fortunately, has by and large continued, and it continues today. And it can be worried, it can be put in question, we can have problems, we do, because of people's other allegiances, Americans' other allegiances.
Can I just ask one more thing? I'm really sorry. There seems to be, when I'm listening to you, and I think it's really great, two things are coming up in my mind. One is hegemony. One is hegemony, is that you subordinate everyone goes along, and the other one is tolerance. And are we making the argument that one successful way of having a state is to just have everyone do as they're told, or think that they're doing their own thing, but actually it's the sort of hegemonic thing going on? And the other might be being tolerant and sort of accepting and respecting one another, but which might in a way at some point create a desire to separate or
I think, although I like to generalize and simplify, there are limits to what I ought to do in that line. I'm thinking, for example, of countries inside Europe today, Scotland, which has gone a considerable way toward a separate existence. And I used to know years ago a Scottish nationalist, and he'd been in the Labour Party, and he joined the Nationalists, and I said, isn't that sort of modern romanticism? And he said, not at all. He said, it's not that Scotland wants to go off and join France and stand against England. the way we did maybe 200 or 300 years ago, that we, as an independent Scotland, we will firmly remain within the European community, we will remain within NATO, and with these shelters we can have a separate existence. And I think for example, Spain of Catalonia, which is acquired a certain degree of autonomy. And the Italians, in the case of the Italians, in particular the Alto Adige, the province of Bolzano, which is 95% German-speaking, and has been given a degree of autonomy. And although I think many of them still prefer to be in Austria, why they've done very well, and there's no terrorist movement in the Alto Adige against the Italians the way there was maybe 50 years ago. So that, again, not to generalize, but I think a country, a wise and successful country, can devise a formula that will permit, diversity and multiculturalism, and yet maintain at the same time national unity, which would be useful for everyone.
Thank you.
Can I do a follow-up on this? Because it seems to me that we should draw a distinction, at least theoretically, between states that appear to fail in terms of holding themselves together, such as potentially Belgium or Canada or others, the United Kingdom, and states that do actually fall into chaos. And just from the examples that you've touched upon and that I can think of, it seems to me the most likely predictor of chaos is the end of a long-standing dictatorship, whether it's the Duvaliers in Haiti, Siad Barre in Somalia, Mobutu in the Congo, or Tito in Yugoslavia. And that's a greater predictor than ethnic homogeneity or ethnic diversity. But on this point of whether ethnic diversity is or is not critical, I hope that the world has now come to accept the concept of a responsibility to protect in cases of genocide. I think that Kosovo was the beneficiary of the lessons of Rwanda. But as we're seeing in the case of Libya today, I don't think there is any consensus on whether there is a responsibility to protect in the case of state failure that does not involve genocide. You want to comment on that?
Well, I'd say two things. First of all, in my lifetime, I was born in 1932, so in my lifetime, we've seen you might say, a decision on the part of humanity, if I'm not wrong, that nation states are here to stay. It used to be easier, I'm not saying it was better, but it was easier, I think, in the old days, to destroy a state externally, which is not to say that we should welcome a return to wars and invasions, but the creation of the United Nations system has created a more or less stable number of independent entities in the world called countries. And it can be for good or bad, but in many cases it is a relatively new factor in world history. Getting back to what you were saying about dictators, I think certainly that the end of a dictator or of a dictatorship has often produced chaos and uncertainty, and that's been the case in Europe as elsewhere, and even since World War II. Doesn't necessarily produce chaos, but in the case of, say, Portugal and Spain, it certainly produced a lot of uncertainty, happily resolved, but certainly uncertainty. I think dictators tend not to prepare for a successor. Maybe they should, but they don't. And certainly that was the case with Siad Barre in Somalia. But it's very often the case. It's not only dictators, but leaders in general, I think, do not take the care they should in bringing up a successor. I think that tends to be true of American presidents, among others.
I have a question.
My name is Fran Medusi. I'm a sophomore student here at KOK. I want to go back to Norway. Our politicians and the politicians of the countries which Kosovo is neighbors with usually attempt or to associate the success of our countries with their entrance to the EU. Now, going to Norway and saying that they're considered as the most successful country in the world and they are not members of the EU, do you think that this debunks this myth or stereotype?
The myth that Kosovo should treat membership of the European Union as an indicator of success.
Well, Norway is unique in having a great amount of riches and independence that it's one on its own, certainly, but one it can afford to continue outside of the EU.
Although it's a fairly new country, having been created in 1920. So it's not like it's got a similar tradition.
I think that, I think any country must judge for itself what the advantages or disadvantages may be of joining a larger entity like the European Union. I mean, there are people in the EU now that say, my God, why did we create the euro? I can't devalue it. It's hard to generalize, but I mean, you want me to say whether I think Kosovo should become ever closer to the European Union? I guess offhand I would say I suppose it should, but again, that's now 13 hours I've been in Kosovo, I shouldn't say any more than that.